An 8.2 magnitude earthquake in South America. NATO suspends cooperation with Russia. And in Taiwan, a meeting to re-examine a contentious trade deal fails to go ahead.
Good evening. Authorities have begun to assess the damage after a magnitude 8.2 earthquake shook Chile's northern coast, killing 5 people. The quake also triggered a tsunami that pounded the shore with 2-meter-tall waves. As James Aiken reports, the government isn't taking any chances and has issued a state of emergency in the region.
The shaking set off landslides that blocked roads, knocked out power for thousands, damaged an airport, and sparked several fires. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake was relatively shallow at 20 kilometers below the seabed. It struck 100 kilometers northwest of the mining port of Iquique, near the Peruvian border. It was so strong that shaking could be felt in Bolivia's capital almost 500 kilometers away. More than 20 significant aftershocks followed. It was very strong compared to the last one, said this Bolivian resident. She said her building has lots of cracks in it. In the streets of Peru, there was also panic, shock, and confusion. It scared me. I was walking and wondered what's happening. I got dizzy, says this woman. Officials say the victims were crushed by collapsing walls or died of heart attacks. As the leader of a country prone to earthquakes, Chile's president was quick to appear in a national address in the early morning hours soon after the tremor. Mandatory evacuation orders for some regions were issued, and the government sent riot police to join hundreds of soldiers deployed to prevent looting and round up inmates who escaped from a woman's prison. Tsunami warnings were extended for northernmost Chile, but warnings have been canceled for other regions. A tsunami warning was issued for as far away as Hawaii, although waves were not expected to flood inland. Chile is one of the world's most earthquake-prone countries due to active tectonic plates just off the coast. The last time Chile was struck by a major quake was in 2010, when the government prematurely waved off the tsunami danger. Most of the dead from that magnitude 8.8 quake survived the shaking, only to be caught in a killer wave that destroyed 220,000 homes and washed away large parts of many coastal communities. James Aiken, TVB News.
NATO has suspended cooperation with Russia to protest its annexation of Crimea. The alliance's military commander says despite a partial troop withdrawal, Russia still has enough military might on Ukraine's border to carry out a successful incursion into the country if it wanted to. Alan Buckner reports.
It was the first meeting of NATO's foreign ministers since the occupation of Ukraine's Crimean region, which has touched off the worst East-West crisis since the Cold War.
We are suspending all practical cooperation with Russia, military and civilian. At the same time, we keep our diplomatic lines of communication open.
The foreign ministers also agreed to beef up their defenses of frontline alliance members feeling menaced by Russia's increased assertiveness. On Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he'd ordered the pullback of a battalion of several hundred troops from Ukraine's border area. The NATO ministers noted that's still a small fraction of the tens of thousands of troops estimated to be there.
But it is a welcome gesture in the right direction. The question now is there a way to build on that in order to be able to find a way to move the masses of troops back and truly de-escalate?
NATO has said it has no military plans to defend Ukraine, but it will cooperate in sending in experts to help with training and other defense programs. Ukraine's foreign minister said Kiev has no intention of seeking membership in the alliance, something Russia strongly warned against prior to the meeting in Brussels.
Ukraine does not have a legal basis to apply for NATO membership. And the Ukrainian legislation, both adopted by the parliament and the program of the government, does not foresee the NATO membership as a priority.
Another major problem facing Kiev now is an announcement Tuesday by Russia's state-owned natural gas giant, Gazprom, that it's hiking prices for Ukraine by 50%. It also underlines Europe's dependence on Russian energy.
In the near future, there's no possibility that Europe will completely stop buying Russian gas, but it will definitely encourage them to look elsewhere and perhaps support projects like gas pipeline projects that deliver gas from Central Asia directly to Europe.
Alan Brookney, TVB News.
Thailand's caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra is facing another legal challenge that could remove her from office. The Constitutional Court has accepted a case of alleged misconduct brought by opposition senators against her over the transfer of a key government official in 2011. The senators accused Yingluck of abusing her position back then by moving the head of the National Security Council to an inactive post. The official was known to be an opposition supporter. The Constitutional Court has ordered Yingluck to present her defence within 15 days. If found guilty of interfering in state affairs for her personal or her party's benefit, she would have to step down as Prime Minister. Yingluck also faces separate charges of negligence over a rice subsidy scheme that has run up huge losses, a case that could lead to her impeachment. The Prime Minister's supporters have accused the courts of bias and attempts to oust her through unfair use of the legal system. They have called for a mass rally in Bangkok on Saturday. Well, the search for the missing Malaysian airliner continues today, with an international fleet of planes taking off from an airbase in Perth, Australia. But experts say finding any trace of flight MH370 remains a difficult task.
In this particular case, the last known position was a long, long way from where the aircraft appears to have gone. I have to say, it's very complex, it's very demanding, and we don't have hard information like we might normally have. In the first instance, the most important thing is to find some debris on the surface of the ocean.
Meanwhile, Malaysia is focusing its criminal investigation on the cabin crew and pilots of the missing jetliner. The country's national police chief says all 227 passengers have been cleared of possible involvement in hijacking, sabotage, or having personal or psychological problems that could have been connected to the flight's disappearance. Malaysian authorities have still not ruled out mechanical problems in the disappearance, but say evidence suggests the plane was deliberately diverted from its route to Beijing.
Officials in Seoul said today they believe an unmanned drone that crashed on a frontline South Korean island was North Korean. The drone was found on Banyong Island Monday. That day, the two Koreas fired hundreds of shells into each other's waters in a flare-up of animosity over a long-disputed sea boundary. The exercise appeared to be more saber-rattling than the actual start of a military standoff. Citing unidentified military sources, South Korean media reported that the drone was taking pictures of military facilities on South Korean islands near the Yellow Sea boundary with the North. In Taiwan, lawmakers today failed to re-examine a contentious service trade bill with the mainland. The occupation of the Legislative Yuan's main chamber by student protesters have now entered the third week, but they're facing increasing challenges to keep up their fight. Lawmaker Chang Ching-chung of the ruling Kuomintang presided over today's meeting in the Legislative Yuan. It fueled an uproar because he's the one who has been criticized for making the call to pass a bill within 30 seconds during its first review last month. That abrupt approval, which he has since apologized for, allowed the bill to move from the committee stage onto the General Assembly, which is dominated by KMT members. The opposition Democratic Progressive Party refused to let today's re-examination of the bill go ahead. They occupy the conference rooms and passageways overnight and blocked KMT legislators' access to the escalators. The meeting ended up being postponed until tomorrow. As Chang left the legislative building, student leader Chen Wei-ting went up to protest, but was hauled away by police. In a rally they insist is separate from the opposition political parties, the students urged more people to surround the Legislative Yuan to stop the legislature from proceeding with the bill readings. Protesters demanded the legislators put in place a new law that would monitor all deals made with the mainland first. Student leader Lin Feifan accused the Kuomintang of being unrepentant. The students are trying to keep up the fight, which has entered its third week, but it's getting tougher. At one stage, the protesters sitting outside the legislative building had pebbles thrown at them from nearby buildings. This as more counter-protests are being staged to urge the students end their occupation. And the two student leaders, Lin and Chen, now face potential legal action after complaints were filed with the police against them. Taipei prosecutors said they're investigating the cases now. At a meeting with his party, which was held amid more protesting outside, President Ma Ying-jeou reiterated his belief that the service trade deal has more pros than cons for Taiwan. He pointed out that since a cross-strait economic cooperation agreement was signed in 2010, Taiwan has saved on levies amounting to 42 billion Taiwanese dollars.
Here in Hong Kong, a group of academics today put forward their proposal for universal suffrage in the 2017 chief executive election. One of their key suggestions is to allow the public to nominate potential candidates. Evelyn Leung has more.
The academics who put forward their proposal for political reform said the aim is to achieve true democracy under the Basic Law. The proposal includes a statutory civic nomination track in nominating potential CE candidates. Anyone who receives the support of no less than 2% of the voting population can become a potential candidate. The nominating committee and political parties can also recommend their own candidates. These potential candidates will then have to get the support of 1/8 of the members of the nominating committee to run in the CE election. The academics said the composition of the nominating committee could be modeled on the framework of the 1,200-strong election committee in the 2012 vote. And the electoral base of various subsectors should be enlarged. After the candidates have been confirmed, a maximum of 2 rounds of elections will be held. The winning candidate will have to garner more than 50% of the total votes cast. The academics insist the proposal does not include any screening mechanism.
The key issue is whether the nominating procedure will impose an unreasonable restriction on a person's rights to stand for election. Under our proposal, so at least you can't sort of manipulate in such a way to screen out worthy candidates. But unless you can control 7/8 of the membership of the nominating committee, otherwise you can't kick out someone whom Hong Kong people genuinely want to have as a candidate for the CE.
The academics hope that their proposal will be able to break the current political impasse, and they stress Beijing and the Hong Kong government would not have an excuse to turn down the proposal by saying it doesn't comply with the Basic Law. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
The Financial Secretary has stressed the need to broaden Hong Kong's tax base, but John Tsang says the current political environment is not conducive to the introduction of new taxes. Joao de Silva reports.
A structural deficit that could come in 7 years. That was the grim prediction of a report by a working group on long-term government finances that took into account factors such as an aging population and a soon-to-be shrinking workforce. At the Hong Kong Bankers Club today, the Financial Secretary shrugged off suggestions that predictions he had made in the past about the city's finances had not come true. John Tsang noted that it wasn't him who raised fears about a structural deficit, but a team of financial experts. He pointed out that a structural deficit may not actually come true, but that it's time society addresses the issue to try to prevent it from happening. Despite this, he ruled out the introduction of a goods and services tax. He noted the outcome of a consultation conducted by his predecessor, Henry Tang, which revealed that the public will not accept it. Tang agreed, however, that the issue of broadening Hong Kong's tax base is worth further discussion.
Released about a month ago by the government-appointed Working Group on Long-Term Financial Planning, the report did not rule out the introduction of new taxes,